The topic for this lesson is key signatures, so you can take a look at a piece of sheet music and automatically know which notes are supposed to be sharp all the time, which ones are supposed to be flat all the time. So hopefully you already understand how to find the notes on the lines and the spaces, and you've already done some of the counting, because we're not going to be dealing with how to do any of that stuff. We're just focusing on the key signature. And so I'm going to show you how to find the key signature. Then I'm going to show you something called a circle of fifths and how we're going to use that to calculate the sharps and the flats in each of these keys. Let's jump in. The first thing you need is this thing right here. That is the actual key signature itself. So over here we have the clefs. This is what right here is called the treble clef. This was called the bass clef. You don't need that for this lesson. This over here is something called the time signature. We're not really dealing with that. This is the thing we're dealing with in this lesson. We got two sharps sitting here, and actually it's only one sharp. Let me show you how. Right here, if we zoom into this top one, this sharp right here is on. If you've already done sharps and flats, you'll notice that this line right here is cutting through the middle of that sharp, and so that means that that sharp is dedicated to that line. And so that line is an F, if you're just reading that line by itself. And so that means that in this entire song, this key signature right here that we just read, that F sharp right there, is telling us that all the Fs in the entire song are going to be sharp, whether there's a sharp on them or not. Unless it says natural, it's going to always be sharp. So if we take a look over here, we've got, for example, this note right here, which is just an F. Like, it would normally just be that note right there. But because of our key signature, because it said every single F it's supposed to be sharp, we wouldn't play that one, we'd play that one. Now it's a little bit confusing because this note right here doesn't have a sharp next to it, right? It just looks like an F natural. That's what the key signature is for, is because when they're writing out the piece of music, they don't want to have to write a sharp next to every single F when all the Fs are going to be sharp. So they just tell you at the beginning of the song, all the Fs, they're going to be sharp. So this would be F, and then we'd go to E, and then you go to D, and then when we go to this note right here, we go back up to that F, only it's not an F, it's still an F sharp, unless it says otherwise. If we scoot over here, then this one right here, that one is an F. Now, you'll notice on our key signature, there's no sharp on that space down there. This sharp right here, the top sharp, says, if it's on that F line, it's saying all the Fs, no matter what lines or spaces it shows up on, if it's higher or lower, all of them in that clef are going to be sharp. Now, I said there's kind of only one sharp really. That's because this sharp down here, the second sharp, is also on the F line. So they just kind of dedicate like one sharp per clef. So one for the treble clef and one for the bass clef. And that tells you that all the Fs all across the song in the treble clef and in the bass clef, they're all going to be sharp. So like I said over here, this line would be F sharp, E, D, F sharp. And then over here, we would have A, G, F sharp, like that. And then we have one down here, that one right there. Instead of being F right there, would be F sharp. Let me show you that one right there. So that note is also an F sharp instead of being an F natural. So let me show you one more example here. This one is got flats in it. And as you can guess, those two relate to those two down here. So if we zoom in on those top ones, you'll notice that this top flat sign right there is on that space that is reserved for the E. So instead of having E's in this song, we're gonna have all E flats. This one over here is on that B line. It's got that B line cutting right through the middle of it. So instead of having any B's, we're gonna have all B flats no matter where they show up, even if they're down here. And that's what this bottom part is about down here, telling you that also in the bass clef, all of the E's and all of the B's are going to be flat. So let's find those in the song here. We've got in the treble clef, obviously this first one has that line cutting right through the middle of it, so we're not going to play B natural there, we're going to play B flat. And then down here, we've got E, so instead of playing E natural, we're going to play E flat. We've got one more down here. That one right there would normally be an E, but because of the flat sign on the E space right there, then we're going to play an E flat instead. So it would be B flat, C, G, E flat, and then F, E flat, D, F, just like that. So that is what the key signature is about, is telling you which ones are going to be sharps and which ones are going to be flat through the entire song. Now I can tell you just by looking at this thing over here, this song right here that we did before is in the key of G. I know that because there's only one sharp in the key signature. I know even though it looks like there's two, they're the same. So we say there's only one sharp in the key signature, and every single time you have just one sharp in the key signature, it means you're going to be in the key of G, and the sharp is always going to be F sharp. Every time. This one over here is in the key of B flat. Whenever you have two flats, just two flats, they're always going to be B flat, and the other one's always going to be E flat, and it's always going to mean you're in the key of B flat. How do I know that? Other than magic, I've memorized it. There's 12 of them you have to memorize eventually. So let's take a look at the circle of fifths. Here we go. Now the circle of fifths is just a tool that can be used in a whole bunch of different ways. So this is not like the way to use the circle of fifths. This is just one of the cool things that shows up in this circle of fifths thing that we kind of like discovered, that when you put all the 12 keys that are possible, the key starting on C, the key starting on D flat, D, E flat, E, these 12 right here, when you put those 12 in this order, all kinds of weird stuff starts like popping up. So what we do is, for what we're going to be using it for today, we're going to call this side the flat side, which is why it says flats right there, and of course the other side is going to be the sharp side. So all of the keys on this side over here, on the flat side, are keys that have flats in them. We never have sharps and flats in the same key signature. So as I said before, if you are on the flat side, if you have two flats, it's always going to be B flat, just like that one is right there. It's just automatic. Two flats, key of B flat every time. So if you only have one flat, that means that you're going to be in the key of F. Now, conveniently, these things are all located in like a clock and reverse clock order. So on the flat side, we've got the key with one flat that sits right there. At the reverse 2 o'clock position is B flat. The reverse 3 o'clock position is E flat, because E flat, as you can tell, has 3 flats in the key signature. The key of A flat is at the 4 o'clock position, D flat, and then at the 6 o'clock position, we've got the key of G flat. We've also got one more. We'll get to it in just a second. Now let's move over to the sharp side. First, we're going to stop by here. If you don't have anything in your key signature, if there's like no sharps or flats, it means you're in the key of C. And at the 0 o'clock position, we have the key of C. So that's telling us that the key of C is the only one with no sharps, no flats. 1 o'clock on the sharp side is the key of G, and so if you only have one sharp, it's always going to be F sharp, and it means you're in the key of G. In the 2 o'clock position, we've got the key of D, so if you have two sharps in your key signature every single time, you're going to be in the key of D. 3 o'clock is A, 4 o'clock is E, 5 o'clock is B, and then 6 o'clock we have F sharp. So how can you have like two keys in the same position? We've got, on one hand, we've got the G flat that we already talked about, G flat, right? And then over here we have the F sharp. These are actually the same note, right? There's the bottom note of a group of 3 black notes. We've referred to this before as enharmonic equivalents. So G flat and F sharp are the same exact note. If you want to think of this as the key of F sharp, then you're going to be playing using 6 sharps. If you play this in the key of G flat, you'll be playing it using 6 flats. Let me show you what I mean. So if we play it in F sharp, we would call this note F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. So there were 6 sharps in there. Now if we call this the key of G flat, we would call this note G flat. We'd call this one A flat. We'd call this one B flat. We'd call this one C flat. We'd call this one D flat. This would be E flat. This would be F. And then we're back to G flat. Now I told you there's a lot of different ways this circle of fifths gets used, this tool here that seems to be very multi-purpose. So let me show you this. If you're wanting to figure out like which flats that are supposed to be in a key. Let's say, for example, you're playing and someone says, hey, let's play, Mary Had a Little Lamb in the key of E flat. First thing you should do is say, why are we playing Mary Had a Little Lamb together? Don't you know any cooler songs? But then right after that, you need to know what's in the key of E flat. Obviously, E flat is in the key of E flat, and you might remember, if you memorize your circle of fifths, that E flat is at the 3 o'clock position, right? So we've got the 3 o'clock position on the flat side. We know there's supposed to be 3 flats. We know that one of them is E flat, What about the other two? What are the other two supposed to be? So here's the cool part. If you're in the key of, let's jump back to the key of F. If you're in the key of F, you've got your circle memorized, and you know that the key of F is on the flat side. It's got one flat in it. That flat is B flat. So the flats always start right here, right? So the key of F has one flat in it. The one flat is B flat. Now, if we move over to the 2 o'clock position, then we know, all right, B flat is the 2 o'clock position on the flat side. So it means there's two flats, but what two flats are they? Check this out. Every single time you've got a key with flats in it, it's going to start at B flat and it's going to move this direction for however many flats you have. So the key of B flat has got two flats. We start at B flat and we see it's got B flat and then one over. So the total of the flats would be B flat and E flat because it's got two. You just keep going around the circle until you end up at the number of flats that you have in that key. So for example, if we're in the key of A flat, you might remember that, all right, so that's the 4 o'clock position on the flat side. It's got 4 flats. We're going to start at B flat and then just go around this direction until we've got 4 flats, right? So the first one would be B flat. Obviously, that's the first one. Then we've got E flat, and then we've got A flat. That's our third flat. And then our last one is going to be D flat. So those are our 4 flats in the key of A flat, B flat, and then just cycle around until you've got as many flats as that key requires. In other words, you're going to start at B flat and always go one past whatever the name of the key is. If that didn't make sense, then ignore that completely, but I'm going to try explaining it one more time. So if you're at the 3 o'clock position, the last flat that you're going to have is the 4 o'clock position. If you're at the 4 o'clock position, the last flat that you're going to have is going to be the 5 o'clock position, D flat. If you're in the key of D flat, the last flat you're going to have is G flat. So you're going to start at B flat and go all the way up to the key that you're in and then move one past that. And once you're one past it, you should have the total number of flats that you need for that key. And hopefully that makes more sense than is confusing for you. Let's jump over to the sharp side. All right, on the sharp side, we've got a similar game going on here. In the key of G, we're at 1 o'clock. That means we're supposed to have one sharp. Which sharp is it? It's F. Now you remember the flats started at B flat here and moved that direction, right? The sharps are going to start right here and they're going to move that direction. So G has one sharp, it's F sharp, right? And so we don't have to go any farther than that because there's just one sharp. Let's move to something a little more difficult, the key of A. The key of A has 3 sharps in it. So we start at our sharp starting point. It's going to be F sharp, and then we need 3 of these, right? So we'd go 1 over. It should also have C sharp. That's the second one. And then it should have 1 more, which would be G sharp. That's the third one. So the key of A has in it F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. If you see a key signature that has 3 sharps in it, you're going to be in the key of A, and it's always going to be F sharp and C sharp and G sharp that are indicated in your key signature. Now, anytime you're practicing some exercise, you're working on some skill, and you want to practice it in multiple keys, I'd highly recommend using the circle of fifths to practice it. One, to memorize the circle in order, so you're always doing things with the circle and you get it memorized. Because as you'll find out, this tool is used, like I said, all over the place. So this thing just becomes more and more important the more you get into music theory and the longer you play. So you want to have this thing memorized. You will be very familiar with it. But if you're just even practicing major scales, just practicing the key of C and then the key of F. If you're doing scales, and then practicing B flat and going all the way through the entire circle, playing your scales that way. If scales is what you're practicing. If you got some other skill that you're working on, just maybe playing triads. So playing a C and then an F and then a B flat and E flat. Anything you're gonna do, try to play all of the notes to go through all the different keys. You want to use the circle of fifths to get around in it. So now hopefully you understand how to find the key signature, how to read the key signature, and at least you understand the concept that there is a thing called the circle of fifths and that it can be very helpful in finding what the sharps and the flats in each key are. So go ahead and send me your videos, your questions about this lesson. Be happy to respond to it, and I'd love to see how you've taken this concept and taken it to the next level. Good luck. Have fun.